Hello people, this is another question time video that was on last night. So yeah, let's get on with the questions and we will see what we get.
Tina Sand. Labour proposes taxing private school fees to fund primary school meals for all children. Is this fair?
When I heard about this, I thought, yeah, I think it's more than fair. If anything, from my point of view, I would also apply that to private healthcare. Whack extra on private healthcare in a tax and give it to our NHS. At the end of the day, I'm not against people going for the private area, but ultimately it shouldn't be at the destruction of the public sector. You know, what we've got at the moment is a disaster really for children in schools. They're like one of the audience, the teacher in the audience said, it's so much difficult for a child to learn if they're hungry. And to be honest, we're all human beings. We know what it's like to feel hungry. If we're doing something all day and we ain't ate, and we have a lovely meal on the night, you know. So at the end of the day, I really do think it's a good idea. Obviously, the wealthy ain't going to particularly like it because it means they've got to spend more money, and the one thing the wealthy hates doing is spending their money. The only time the wealthy puts their money up is if they know they're going to get more back in profit. So yeah, I definitely agree with this, and it's always easy to pick fault and things in it if you don't agree with them. But this, I just can't believe how private schools has got charity status. How the hell no? If you want to know, I'm sorry, I would get rid of that straight away. How is it charitable to teach a child and charge upwards of what, 16 grand a year? That's not a charitable status thing, is it? You know, they're run like a private business, and they should be treated as such and have to pay tax. And I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, by having private sectors that's running for profit, it actually takes money away from our struggling public schools. And this is what the Tory Party has been doing all along with all the start-ups, and they've took millions out of the public run school system in order to fund their ideology new systems, which is just a disaster, and I don't agree with any of that. Right, for that one I will move on now, and we will go to question number 2. I'm trying to keep it as quick as possible.
Natasha Khan. What action can we take to prevent the Assad regime executing another chemical attack on their own people? What action can we take?
Oh, Syria. Oh, God. After when all this started kicking off, I looked into what the cause was, and believe me, what our media tells us, it really is. I'm a person that likes to know how things work. I like to understand things, and when I started looking into it, and I started talking to a few of my American friends and on Facebook and things like that, I started to create a picture that is all over the pipeline, and Assad was put in the middle of the West and Russia because the pipeline was going to feed up between it was going to go up through Syria into the south of Europe. Now Russia is one of the biggest suppliers of gas pipeline. I don't know if it's gas or oil, whatever the pipelines are. But Russia's got a monopoly on feeding Europe, well, the EU, with energy. So Russia made it clear to Assad that if he signs the final agreement of the deal, bad things are going to happen. And let's face it, Russia don't care where they kill people. Look at that guy in London. They poisoned him with radiation in London, the UK capital. So when Russia makes a threat to a leader, sorry about that, that's only my water here. But yeah, that's the thing. See, it is more complicated than you think, and I'm not standing up for what Assad has done to his people, but what's got Assad's back up is the fact that he sided with Russia and he cancelled the pipeline. And bearing in mind, he cancelled the pipeline to the going through his country at the last meeting of the agreement. It was going to be a very lucrative deal for Syria, and later on it was also going to link up through Turkey too. So it was going to be a very, very wealthy deal for all of them involved. And, you know, obviously America was involved, because obviously America hates the fact that Russia's got a big hold over Europe, because obviously, well, the EU, Europe, it's mainly the EU. A few countries within the EU that's getting a lot of energy from Russia. So Russia's got a lot of political soft power to say, well, if you do this, well, I'm going to cut the pipelines to Europe, and that would be energy, and it would send some of the European countries into darkness essentially. So that's why. So Assad has got this mentality that he's not going to give in, because he looks on it as it's only happened because of the West, and because I turned my back on the West with the pipeline, and part of that is true. The one key thing that nobody really knows is what Russia actually said to Assad to make him back down on signing the deal. There's loads of rumours that he was told straight by Russia that if he goes ahead and signs this pipeline deal to feed up through the south of Europe, that Russia would assassinate him, and you know, but that's all rumours. But yeah, as for now, where we are with it, it's chaos, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you do now. Millions of people has died. Millions of people's all over the Europe, or you know, I just don't see how doing anything now is going to make much of a difference. The whole country, parts of the country has just been completely destroyed. And as they said on the panel, you know, a no-fly zone may sound like a simple solution, but when you've got Russia making it clear that they're defending Assad, and the reason Russia's doing it is because Assad actually sided with Russia and blocked the pipeline from going ahead, which meant that Russia still keeps their political power with the EU over energy supply. So it isn't. The media likes to make everything sound simple, and they feed all of us with a very simple story that makes us hate one particular side. And you know, I'm not saying Assad has become a very twisted man because he's angry at the way things have worked out and how the West has manipulated the riots and allowed it to get out of control, and we are where we are now, and he's using his army and military to kill his own people. And I think the only way to get peace is really to talk. And if you're not talking, you're dropping bombs. All you do is encourage, like they said, that bloke with lost most of his family. You know, he's going through unbelievable grief, and eventually that grief is going to manifest itself into anger. And when it manifests itself into anger, he's gonna want to kill as many as the military as he can, because grief and anger, it goes hand by hand. First you get the grief, and then once you think you get, you know, grief can turn to anger very quickly, and that's what's going to happen. And that's what's feeding the cycle of Syria and many others, is innocent people are losing loved ones, and young men like himself who's still going through a grief time. He's lost so many of his family. That's going to end up him turning to anger, and if ISIS gets to him, they will manipulate him and convince him to fight, and that's the problem. And you know, I think talking is the only way to bring about peace. And as long as you keep dropping bombs, but that's the problem. If one side's not willing to talk, and they just wants to keep hammering and dropping bombs, the only other way you can do is use military power to try and stop it. But then it's just a chaos. So yeah, it's not as easy as the media in this country tries to make out. It really not. There's so much more complicated, and that's why I love the internet, and I hope the internet stays free, because what the internet allows you to do, it allows you to research and spend time looking at loads of different websites, and through that what you get is a consensus of truth, because truth always comes back. Lies disappears. And if anyone who's lied in the future, you know what I'm saying, when you lie, people tend to forget lies, where if you tell the truth is the truth. It always comes back. So that's, yeah, so I'll move on to the next question now.
Why are we paying for Brexit? We voted to leave, so just leave.
Obviously, most people watching this would know where I stand on Brexit. I remain, not because I've got an ideology to vote Remain. I voted Remain based on the fact that I did research, and all this over Spain, we're going to keep getting this rhetoric that we're being punished as the United Kingdom. I'm sorry, the punishment is this magical Article 50 bill. When a country activates that bill, they're basically punishing themselves, because what that bill does is it acknowledges to the EU that we want to leave as a country. That's fine. But then the processes and the laws and the rules governed by that Article 50 is all in the EU member states' hands. So now the EU is in a position where they've got to try and get an agreement by all member states. Now, under the condition, my understanding is each member state has got a veto on any future deal. Now, if the UK, for example, with Spain, the UK's made sure that Gibraltar is not up for negotiation. So now, Spain is well within its rights under the Article 50 bill to say, well, fair enough, we're going to veto it. So Spain could veto any deal. Now, this is a crunch time for the EU, because if the EU starts trying to put pressure on Spain and other countries that feel that they should get something from the UK and they're not, and the likes of Germany or France starts trying to put pressure on these smaller countries, that's going to be the end of the EU. The EU bosses and all of them, they've got to respect the countries. The Article 50 bill makes it quite clear that the country that's leaving, once they've activated Article 50, all the power is within the EU. We're getting a lot of crap from the Brexiteers saying, oh no, everything's great. No, it's not. The reality, you can call this fear Project Fear. This is the normal go-to response. The Project Fear, oh, it's Project Fear. No, it's actual fact based on Article 50 bill that was sold to people as a way of getting out the EU. But what wasn't told to the people is the Article 50 bill in itself is the punishment to leaving the EU. We're going to have a hell of a lot of problems, because all member states of the EU can choose to veto any type of deal that we manages to make up within the EU. Let's say, for example, like Poland is another country that's come out and they've been pretty reasonable, and they said, well, all we want is a guarantee that all Polish people in this country will be treated fairly. And that's a reasonable, easy thing to do for the UK. But then if other countries started getting more, Poland could always turn around and say, well, hold on a minute, we're not getting hardly anything like that. So they could change their mind. And if they change their mind and they choose to go with Spain and veto any deal, the way I'm seeing it going is the UK is going to end up going out of the EU on World Trade Organization rules. I think it's too complex. Well, it's definitely too complex to finish it within 2 years. There's no way in hell this negotiation is going to be finished in 2 years. The only way it's going to be finished in 2 years is if the Tory party is only planning around 6 or 8 months of negotiation. And like I said, I suspect what's going to happen is the Tory party is going to put a lot of pressure on Germany and the other big countries that we've got a lot of trade with, to put a lot of pressure on these countries that are saying, well, no, we want this. If we're not going to get this, we're going to veto. So the EU is going to try and put pressure on the EU to force it through. And if the EU does that, then, well, the EU's finished. Those countries that is well within their right under the Article 50 bill to veto any deal, which means the deal will not go through the EU, then that's the end of the EU. The EU will collapse, and then that leads on to our problem, because our government may not have much in the states of debt to the EU, but I can guarantee you our banking system's got billions, all linked in with the EU. So if the EU collapses, the euro collapses. If the euro collapses, our banking system collapses. And then from an internal point of view then, if our banking system collapses, that's basically mortgages, house prices, the whole lot comes down very fast. And we're talking about another massive financial crash. That's why we can't just leave. And that's why we've got to really consider about the final settlement paid to the EU. Because it's not in our interests for the euro to collapse, because our banking system will take a massive hit, and then that would lead on to our government taking a massive hit. And bearing in mind the right to buy scam, I don't call it a scheme because it's a right to buy scam. Basically, new people, new home buyers can get up to £77,000 of taxpayers' money towards buying a house. Now, if the banking system collapses, what's going to happen? The whole thing is just going to collapse. And, you know, that's an internal issue with the UK. So, you know, leaving the EU ain't going to make us no safer from a banking industry point of view, because globalization is interlinked so much that if one big area goes down, well, look at 2008 for example. It was a USA banking crisis. Mortgage crisis, subprime mortgages all failed basically, and that affected the pound, the euro, and even Japan, and all over the world. It affected everyone. So, you know, thinking that leaving the EU would be safer, we won't, because of our banking system and the way that business works internationally. So it's not in our interest to see the EU collapse. But the Tories don't care. The Tories are going to push the EU to force these member states to agree the deal. And the member states are well within their rights on Article 50, remember that. Because you're going to get a lot of crap coming through the media and the papers and trying to paint it out that, oh, the UK's being victimised, we're being punished for leaving. No, the day Theresa May activated Article 50, she done the punishment. And that's what the Article 50 is designed to do. The Article 50 was also, we also as the UK within the EU actually helped develop the Article 52. So we made it difficult to leave, and now we're leaving. It's just a joke, I just can't believe it. And the reason that no one was really told the truth in the referendum was because Dave Cameron was too busy thinking about after the vote and uniting his party. That's why we weren't told half the stuff that's coming out now. Because Dave Cameron was thinking, well, hold on a minute, I can't go too hard, because if I go too hard, then obviously the Tory party is going to split up, and then we're going to lose power. So that's why the referendum was a joke. It was a political tit for tat. It was just a pathetic referendum, and it will go down in history as the most childish referendum in history. So I'll move on now. Yeah, number 3. We'll put up to number 4 now. So here's question number 4.
With benefit cuts on the sick, disabled and vulnerable, are we returning to Dickensian times? Benefit cuts.
Right, I guess most people would know. The Tories got into power in 2010 on a very simple thing. The debt has to be paid off, and the cut has to happen to pay off the debt. And people voted for that. Well, actually, people voted, but Tories never got a majority, did they? In 2010, they got helped by the Lib Dems. So they got into power based on a coalition. But their main policy was to pay down the debt. At that time, I did not hear the Tory party talk about the deficit one bit. Fast forward to today, it's all about the deficit. They don't even bother acknowledging the debt, because they can't, because the debt is doubled under them. And that's not a good policy to go down, is it? Because voters think, well, hold on a minute, the debt's doubled. So let's not go down that road, let's not talk about the debt. And I think that's where Labour is also going wrong, is they're not even talking about the debt. The debt has doubled under Tory policy for the last 6-7 years. So that tells you, first off, austerity do not work. And secondly, the housing bubble was created under the Tory party. There's no question that we've got an overinflated housing problem in this country. And that was manufactured by George Osborne to get himself out of a massive hole. Because at the end of the day, house prices are massive, which means the tax taken from them is quite high, and that's helped him out. That's helped him out a lot, and that's why we've got massive house prices. And then on top of that, you've also got landlords getting money. Yeah, you've got landlords, then estate agencies, all paying tax with massive rents, which all contributes to a tax increase in the government's treasury. So yeah, I definitely feel that there is definitely a nastiness going around now, and people don't think about what they're on. It's always look at what other people's on, and if they're on more, have a go at them. The Tories got into power basically saying they're going to make work pay, but the first thing they did was lower the welfare state. Now, the welfare state, you could say, was a baseline for companies. Companies couldn't come in and pay people below that baseline, because obviously people would be, well, hold on a minute, benefits. And that's one of the rhetorics that the Tories used a lot is, oh, people's getting more on benefits than they are working. Well, if Tories really wanted to make work pay, why didn't they just make sure that the wages was higher than the benefits? Surely that would have made work pay, and it would have kept living standards high. But oh no, the Tories couldn't do that, could they? So they got into power, they lowered they slashed welfare. They didn't lower welfare, they've absolutely slashed welfare. And all that money, all the cuts, none of it's paid off the debt, because fundamentally the debt has doubled under the Tory party. So, you know, it's frustrating as hell when you hear, oh yeah, well, we're doing this, we're doing that. No, the fact is, you have not got a strong economy. You've got a belief in a strong economy, and you keep repeating that you've got a strong economy to keep the belief that we've got a strong economy, because negativity actually takes money away from the economy. So, you know, what annoys me is the Tory party didn't give a damn in 2010 about negativity. They will go in full speed on how bad the debt is, and it's doubled under them, and they don't say how bad the debt is now, do they? Oh dear. So yeah, we're going to get an even tougher round of cuts now, and even I fear being on the streets, because it's just getting to the state of unbelievable now. as more people are struggling, it is creating a very nasty. It's creating a very nastiness around country, around everywhere now, because everyone's just fearing if they'll have enough money to put the eating on, or even have enough money to feed themselves. And I'm sorry, even food banks are a bit of a joke, because you can only go to a food bank 3 times, and then that's it. You're kicked out, basically. If you've got dependents, you are given a little bit more leeway, but you know, if you're just a single person, you only get it 3 times and you're kicked out, basically. So that's not the saviour that everyone tries to make out. You've got to imagine, if you can only have it 3 times, and at a push you might be able to get it a few more times because you've got children, the reality is, that means that because there's millions constantly going, they're only getting it 3 times. So you imagine how many people are constantly cycling through the system. It's just unbelievable on how it's gone. Benefits should have never been lowered. As I said earlier, benefits should have never been lowered. What should have happened is the Tory party should have made work pay by making sure that work was always higher than benefits. But they never went that way. They thought, well, to make work pay, what we'd do is we'd just slash the benefits and welfare lower than what the wages are now. Even though the wages was already low, they slashed welfare, and they've made it so companies now could even pay less, because welfare and benefits are so low now that benefits are free to go. And I'm sorry, when the Tory person's saying, oh well, we've got loads in employment level. No, that's crap. When you take 0 hours into consideration, which is just slave labour for the young, and is sold as some kind of life adjustment where people can do it if they want to. No, it's crap. 0 hour is basically slavery for big multinationals. One of being like Sports Direct and the other sports shops. They make millions every year, and yet most workers are on 0 hour contracts, and they're told straight, if you don't do this, you're just leave. It's just nasty. We are living in a very nasty time, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. Right, I'll move on to the last question now, which is
Still to the Labour Party.
Should Ken Livingstone be expelled?
so Ken Livingstone and all the race-related issue and all that, and it just, I don't know about anyone listening to this, but that just really, it does my head in, because if you listen to what Ken said, Ken never agreed or personally kind of backed anything. It's just that the right wing of the Labour Party went on one, and something like 13 MPs started tweeting a complete load of lies. Ken never said what they said in the tweet or something, but like I said, it's just this. Ken, as they said on the panel, Ken was a good mayor of London, and because he's been in politics for so long, and obviously he was at the higher end of the Labour Party under Tony Blair, he was a bit of a danger to them being in the party with Jeremy Corbyn. So they needed to get him out, and to be honest, they know that he's got strong views and he won't back down if he feels he's right. And they know that. The right wing of the party knows that. So that's why they've done all this. They've manufactured this issue because they knew they could get Ken, they could rely on Ken kicking off over certain issues. And, you know, he's only repeating facts from history. He's not saying he supported what Hitler done or nothing like that. But it's just all this blowing up to try and put people off voting for Labour. Jeremy Corbyn, basically. They're doing. This programme for weeks and weeks now has always had a jab at Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, and I'm not surprised this question will come up. It annoys me because only a few weeks ago, the Tory party fraud election in the general election was all over the news, but it got totally ignored by Question Time. And Question Time should be an individual thing, and it should take the topics in the news, the top stories within the news, political stories obviously, and ask those questions, but it never. Surprise, surprise, it did bring up Ken Livingstone's issue, innit? Because obviously that's a way to kick Jeremy Corbyn again. It is just a disgusting manipulation. And the one thing I've noticed is the media has stopped showing that they only really show little clips of Jeremy Corbyn's speeches now on the mainstream media. And they know why, because Jeremy Corbyn, when he explains things himself, and when you listen to what he says, a lot of what he says does make sense. And obviously they don't want people falling into that category, so they're just making stuff up and twisting everything. And I kind of feel that the Labour leadership is letting themselves down a bit here, but then they've been pushed into a corner where they've got no choice. They can't come out and defend Livingstone, because if they do, they would get crucified and they would probably end up losing more votes. It's all positioning and being no doubt. I would be amazed if I see Jeremy Corbyn running in a general election, and that would destroy our democracy, because he's a fair elected leader of a political party, and any new leader should have at least one go at asking people in a general election if they want him to be a prime minister. That isn't for MPs to decide, and I'm afraid to say that the Labour right wing are not going to let that happen. They're going to push everything they can to get Jeremy out, and that's what this story is all about. It is all about getting Jeremy out. It isn't about the issue really, because it's just crap. Right, I'll leave it there. Sadly, Question Time ain't on for 2 weeks now, so there'll be a 2 weeks time gap now. So I'll make another video in 2 weeks when Question Time is back. Thanks for listening to my views. Obviously, some people won't agree with them, and I respect that. I respect your view to disagree. That's your point. You know, agree to disagree. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, so I'll leave it there. Until next time, ta-da.